back to Aether Hour, everybody. I am your host, Conrad Franz, joined as always by Dimitri Kalyagan and a returning guest, Anthony of Westgate, here once again. We like to have Anthony on every once in a while, I don't know, quarterly, whatever the sixth division of a year is. We like to have him on to discuss all things ethereal, cosmological, technological, and of course from the Orthodox perspective that we all come from. So it's great to have him back. We're going to be getting into a few different subjects, as well as some things that have just gone down that normally would be reserved for World War Now episodes, but are so technologically relevant they have to be touched on here. Dimitri, how are you doing?
Doing good, Conrad. It's good to be on. And Anthony, very nice to have you on as well, because it's always a fruitful discussion and we really get into the meat of the various subjects we talk about. The noticing, the media storm taking place online on X, Twitter, Substack, all over the place, right? And you being a sort of content creator just like us, you really have a inside perspective on what it's like, fighting on the info war from an Orthodox Christian perspective. So it's always great to speak to you.
We can almost call these appearances with Anthony the McLuhan Hour, Aether Hour, where we explore mediums and messages and whatnot. But speaking of that, we're going to have this linked below, of course. Anthony recently gave a great speech in Meat Space to a parish brotherhood somewhere here in the States. And it's a great talk. I recommend everybody listen to it. But everybody, I'm sure, has heard about the huge explosions in Lebanon where the Israelis hacked into these pagers and blew them up with explosives and everything. And at the same time, we're deep in the election season, so digital psyops are more prevalent than ever. Anthony, wherever you really want to go, if you want to broach some of these topics, with the starting point being your recent fantastic talk, if you want to maybe talk a little bit about how that came about. I found it quite enjoyable. I recommend everybody give it a listen.
Well, thank you, brothers, for having me on once again. It's always an honor to be on World War Now. And yeah, I had my first, face docs in person, where I was invited by a good friend of mine, Father James, to deliver a lecture to the Brotherhood there at his parish. And yeah, it was just a really great honor and privilege and blessing to be able to do that. My lecture was titled Post-Humanity and the Age of Apotheosis. And so it kind of emerged from Father James was asking me to deliver a lecture on the eschatology of Father Seraphim Rose. And I was kind of like, where do I even start with that? That's like his whole body of work. So I had fresh in my mind the Orthodox Revival course, because we had been reading that in my book club. And I kind of had like the previous 3 lectures that I was still really thinking a lot about. And the direction that the course goes, if, for those who are not familiar, it kind of is covering the whole spectrum of world history, in particular in the West, through an Orthodox lens. And Father Seraphim even starts off in the first lecture by saying that history can only be understood through the Orthodox worldview. And so it just kind of goes through the development and evolution of thought in the West and all these influential thought leaders, philosophers, the revolutionary movements. And the way that it ends is with, I believe it's the last chapter or one of the last lectures, is about evolution. And it's not just Darwinian evolution, it's about the evolution of man, and in the context of this kind of development of the spirit of the age in the worldviews of the modern West. And what I had noticed was that a lot of his commentary on, in particular, some of the, what I would consider like proto-transhumanists. You have, for example, Fyodorov, the Russian cosmist. And then, of course, you have the French guy, Teilhard de Chardin, or Desjardins, the French way to say it. And these guys were early transhumanists in the way that they were describing some of the concepts that they were developing. And so with Desjardins, that would be the omega point. That's kind of what you see with Ray Kurzweil's singularity. And so you see a lot of this early kind of transhumanist thought. And that's what spawned my idea to deliver this lecture on transhumanism, because I really believe that this is a topic that Father Seraphim would have written a great deal about if he were alive today, because he pretty much saw this happening. And, it is a very strange movement because it's hard to identify what it is. And because, and I said this in the lecture, that there's basically as many transhumanist philosophies as there are transhumanists, because it's a completely egocentric ideology. But there's also an underlying religious aspect to it. So it is very much what Father Seraphim would consider a new religion. And, you know, as I guess we'll get into maybe here, there's all these concepts that are very religious. I mean, even the singularity itself, it's like kind of this ethereal realm that they talk about. Even though these are materialists, they have this kind of metaphysical aspect to this ideology where, oh, you upload your consciousness to the cloud or to the singularity or whatever, however they word it. And it's like, that's a very metaphysical concept. So there's this whole idea of like a heavenly realm. And it's just a very interesting ideology because it's largely materialistic, but also has a lot of religious language behind it. And in some cases, there's a lot of these like mask off moments with these prominent transhumanist thinkers who they'll even compare it to a religion.
That gets my wheels turning in so many ways. One, just, people hear the orthodox idea of hell. People say, like, people, only go to hell what they want to. They build their hell for themselves on earth. You hear all of these sayings that are more orthodox in their understanding of the afterlife. You read C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, and you're like, what do you mean, man? If I was faced with heaven, obviously I'm picking heaven over hell. It doesn't matter how bad I am. You might hear somebody say something like this. But you see this transhumanism thing where people are literally supposedly uploading their consciousness and I guess trusting that they're going to wake up in a computer and not shoot themselves into the void. I mean, what is that besides basically gleefully running towards hell, basically? I mean, if you understand what hell actually is, which is, self-willed separation from God, then yeah, going into some transhuman android future where you can like live forever and feel sensory pleasure, then yes, that is going to be hell.
Yeah.
You're going to quickly realize, even within your own understanding of comfort, that that's going to become quite hellish quite soon. But yeah, and of course they hear these orthodox ideas of heaven and think that's crazy, but that's exactly what is happening right now, in the sense that these transhumanists are going to be realizing, unfortunately, probably too late, that, I'm convinced that if you upload your consciousness, it's not even going to be you. I think a demon will probably take over and pretend to be you, and everyone will think it all went well, but you've been sent to a deep, deep, deep pit of hell, unfortunately. And I think that's something that not enough people are thinking about, and the fact that people are living within hyper reality already. They're not even, most people aren't even in a full headset yet, let alone quote unquote an uploaded consciousness. But whether they're just on their phone or on their computer, or even with their work that they're doing, they're living in this hyper real world of interconnected computers that is fundamentally preparing them or giving them a transhuman consciousness before that even fully arrives.
Yeah. So a lot of it was just, about how does the current, I guess, evolution of technology tie into the age of Antichrist? Because, this is just my view, but I think that there's going to be a lot of use of technology. In particular, this is something I think about a lot. And I used to think about this a lot, and I was never really able to understand how this would be possible. But when the Antichrist appears and is performing false miracles that will deceive the world, how is that going to occur when most of the Western world, at least, is like staunch materialists, right? So it's like, how are these supernatural miracles going to occur? And so one of the things I mentioned in the lecture is that I give some examples of, a couple of more recent examples. And one in particular was something that Elon Musk said at one of his, I guess it was a conference or something, where he was kind of updating people on the latest developments of the Neuralink. And in a Twitter comment or in a reply, somebody posted the video of him saying this, how it was like helping the blind to see, because it was like, if you guys remember, it was some kind of crippled, I don't know if he was a war veteran or something like that. He was disabled, and the Neuralink helped him to, I guess he was playing, what was it, chess? Like he was able to make chess moves like with his mind. So they're calling it, telepathy. And that's actually the technology. So Neuralink is the company, and telepathy is the current, I guess, version of the Neuralink right now. And so Elon, in a reply to that video, is saying the next evolution of Neuralink, we're in the phase of telepathy. The next evolution is blind sight. And so you see things like that, and it's like, I guess I can see how technology will be used, and I think science as well, obviously, how it will be used to deceive the world into these false miracles, because like they're not real miracles. There's nothing supernatural about it. If you understand what's occurring with the Neuralink, it's actually pretty basic. Like it's something about the vibrations, like it detects the vibrations of your neural networks or something like that. I wouldn't be able to explain it, but it's a lot less advanced than people think it is. So it's very much a false miracle because people are going to use all this language about it as if it's a supernatural thing. And it's not. It's just technology. It's just machines and things like that. So I'm very actually skeptical about a lot of this. I don't think that we'll ever be able to upload our consciousness to some kind of cloud or anything like that. So a lot of this is the fact that these materialists, they don't even know how to explain what consciousness is. They know that it exists, but they don't know, like they don't have an explanation for it. So a lot of it is just very idealistic.
In exactly what you were saying, it's this sort of belief, it's this religious level of belief in the ascendancy of technology and completely replacing the religious perception and even like kind of an eschatology with this new AI-based one. Because I know a lot of friends of mine are more in the engineering world and they're in grad school for engineering or they work at engineering firms or at, STEM-oriented places. And more of the people I'm associated with are more, they think about things more transcendentally and they understand these things, but they always tell me they have people that accuse them. They say, you don't believe in AI. Like if it's a religion, because he will say, or some of my friends will say, I don't believe in this idea that, a general intelligence can be produced from algorithms, that AI can actually become sentient, right? And people will then say, oh, well, so you don't believe in AI. So it's like, what do you mean? So like, we believe in AI now. Like we believe in this genesis that humanity can create life. Like it's a completely metaphysical idea. And all these people are actually, it's all the people that are very afraid of AI. It's because they've convinced themselves that it's going to like take over. And I'm like, look, man, how is an algorithm going to do anything? Like it's an algorithm, like a large language model, ChatGPT, all it is has a large body. It's such a huge database of text that it can make reasonable predictions about what something should sound like when you read it. There's like the idea that this would become sentient is absurd and it's weird religious tech postmodern eschatology.
Yeah, I think what we notice is like you can kind of see the architects of this transhumanist design, Anthony, that you mentioned. Like we all know who's behind all of this, right? But where is their goal leading them? I think we see in the book of Revelations primarily, there will be a mark of the beast designed, probably through a mixture of mystical, dark, magical elements as well as technology. At this point, we can kind of have a more or less clear vision of what that would look like. Whether or not AI or transhumanism will play into that in order to take away that free choice that we all human beings made in the image of God have of repenting and actually going towards theosis, if that will somehow take that away from us, right? Or at least take away that conscious part of our minds which actually makes willful decisions in driving us closer to the holy and life-giving Trinity. If that's what they're trying to design through AI, through Neuralink, right, taking away that conscious ability of actually willfully choosing good, I think that's, and building the system for it, right? Us being the rats in this maze in a laboratory, and the only choice we have is moving society and even our greatest minds in society moving towards building and further developing this eventual mark of the beast, this sort of final product, right? The final version of their demonic iPhone, which they're willing to design and give to us, right? As a completed set design. It's everything that you hear about, Chi-Coms, right? Through Alex Jones, that they have a society of control in China, or what you had in the Soviet Union, but times 10, times 100 worse than that. And I think that's probably the end goal of it, rather than say, view AI as like a conscious monster that they're creating, right? Where it gains consciousness and then somehow takes over. I think it's worse. I think it's primarily about us humans, because we're the subjects of not just the envy of the demons and their anger and their hatred, but also of the servants of the demons, which are these overlords, these so-called globalists who are teaching us about morality and ethics through their liberal and postmodern lens. A good example is if you look at just the 20th century, when Russia was conquered by the Bolsheviks and in the USSR, you still had really smart Russians, went to school sometimes, school, high school, and even university in the Russian Empire, but yet they did not have a chance to leave Russia, and they had to actually live out the rest of their lives under Bolshevik occupation. And what did these great minds, I'll give you some example, what did they had to push society further because they still had all this creative energy, and they weren't ascetics, they weren't monks, monastics, they weren't members of the clergy, and they didn't have that monastic experience. So of course they couldn't just go into a cave or become a monk in a monastery, because monasteries were essentially all shut down by the early 1940s prior to World War II. So there was nowhere to go, frankly, to even learn about monasticism. And that's, I think, one of the devilish sort of tricks of the Talmudic Bolshevik system was that it destroyed this avenue of seeking asceticism in the now occupied Russia, early USSR. But in particular, you look at great minds like Father Pavel Florensky or Nikolai Vavilov, these people like agriculturalists, scientists, the only thing they could do in their life is further develop and strengthen and bolster that Soviet system in which they lived. It's because their creativity was just so, they were very smart, high IQ people, scientists. And like another good example is Mikhail Bulgakov. Like he was a writer and he continued to write great books like Master and Margarita, his famous work. Despite being a very like controversial novel, he was a believing Orthodox Christian his entire life. And he passed away an Orthodox Christian. And he practiced as long as he could until all the churches were closed. But that's just an example of these great geniuses who lived in a time when there was really no other choice. They had to contribute, sell their books, produce scientific works, and further bolster a certain system which they disagreed with. And that's very scary because in our time, as Conrad said, there's tech graduates, there's really smart people going to university, learning about Neuralink, contributing to these programs, contributing to developing AI further, and potentially developing technology which will further place us deeper into subjugation.
Thank you so much for listening to the free segment of this week's Aether Hour. We want to thank Anthony again for coming on, giving us the hot takes as he always does. Be sure to check out everything he does, his Substack, his book club, and of course his recent talk at the parish in Michigan with Father James down in the description below. It's all really good stuff, so I recommend you check it out. Listen to the rest of the episode. Get behind that paywall to hear us talk more about the actual explosion of the beepers in Lebanon. We talk all about different technology prophecies about China versus Russia, deeper understandings of transhumanism and everything going on in our rapidly changing technological futures. So again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the other side. God bless.